We will continue with the much-awaited panel discussion titled Decoding Digital Economy. Please welcome the moderator, Dr. Damon SUNUNTNASUK, CEO of SUNT Group LLC, who will initiate a forward-looking discussion on this topic. Welcome to the stage. All panel discussion attendees are more than welcome to step up.
There's 5 in total, 4 panelists, 1 moderator. I know that SUDHAKAR is here. Okay, well, thank you to everyone who made it to the third day. Clearly we have an intimate audience today, so we would love this to be participatory. I prepared quite a few questions to keep us rolling, but if anyone wanted to interject at any moment, you're more than welcome. So today's panel is called Decoding the Digital Economy, and before we get kicked off, we may have one more panelist join us. I think he might be manning his booth right now, accidentally. But I'd like all the panelists to introduce themselves. Tell us a little bit about who you are, who you're representing, and your area of expertise, please. We can start with you.
Hi, my name's Gary Knights. I'm a product manager with Alemica. Alemica is a global supply chain company. I had given one of the keynotes on the first day about machine learning and how it mimics the working of the human brain. What Alemica does is interconnects the supply chains of large chemical companies. My background is I got my start in military logistics in the Marine Corps. Prior to Alemica, I worked, and after the Marine Corps, I worked for about 10 years in consulting, technology transfer for large companies that morphed into SAP rollouts, and I've been with Alemica for about 20 years, so very familiar with all aspects of the supply chain for global manufacturers.
Thank you.
Hi, so I'm Dara, and I'm representing my company called Bool. And what Bool does is we increase company revenue from existing users. And I come with a 15-year background in customer retention that originated in the online gaming sector and later on went into e-commerce and other businesses as well. That's about it.
Thank you very much.
I'm David Kelly Ostring. My background is, I guess really the baseline is computer sciences since I was very, very young. And I've had a lot of exciting wins. I retired out of IBM. And I think that some of the innovative things that I've had an opportunity to do along the way in my career and associate with others who did similar things, profound things, and friendships made along the way, help shape, you can see this global impact. There's people in the audience, I think, that are some of the brightest minds out there in this space. And I'm very excited to share maybe some vision statements and some of the things that Damon and I have spoken about, and Dara. And so that's it. That's me.
Thank you. And just in time, we have our final panelist, SUDHAKAR, who will introduce himself, who you are, who you're representing, and your background.
Sure. Thanks, Damon. Sorry I was a bit late. Hello, everyone. SUDHAKAR KANDANALA from Sliver Business Services, IT consulting firm based in Chicago, Illinois.
Perfect, thank you. And last but not least, myself, Damon SUNUNTNASUK. I'm the founder and CEO of 2 companies. The first is SUNT Group LLC. It's a strategy and consulting company with global client base. The second company is an e-commerce company where we manufacture custom dietary supplements. So, I'd like to get started with a question to help us all level set and understand exactly what a digital economy is. So would someone like to answer how you might think about or define a digital economy? Go for it, David Kelly.
Okay, first of all, the digital economy currently represents about 15% of the global GDP. So with respect of a macro adoption life cycle, it's still in its early stages. But everybody in this space knows that it's ready to explode. And so the definition of that digital economy is really the intersection of what I call a suite of silos, from AR to VR to IoT, in particular, artificial intelligence and its impact across those silos, and everything from three-dimensional printing, et cetera. It's impacting industry. Everything that we do as humans is being impacted from this digital environment. And we have classic examples of great manifestations of the digital economy, whether it's Netflix or Facebook. You see that it's absolutely holding up the stock market right now. So while it represents a smaller piece of the overall GDP, it's the pervasive driver as we move forward, and the advanced thinkers in the group know this, and they know that what's before us is almost incomprehensible in terms of a tech explosion.
Thank you. I would agree with that sentiment. It's incredible to think that only 15% of the economy is digital right now, because I know it's everything from infrastructure to the policymakers, government, producers, logistics companies. It's really all inclusive. I was wondering if someone on the panel had an idea of what might be some of the most disruptive tools or technologies that will engage and speed up the velocity of the shift to this digital economy.
Well, I think it's pretty clear by sitting in this conference that what we're seeing is quite a bit of growth in AI and its applications anywhere, coming from technological advancements to where companies are concentrating on how to do marketing and automation and so on through AI. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest drivers of the digital economy.
Any other thoughts on major drivers?
I'll take a step back here a little bit. So let me talk about digital economy or decoding digital economy, what it means. When we say decoding, it means there is some mystery about it, right? There is something shrouded, covered, which we're trying to uncover. Now, that mystery, what is that mystery? Is that a mythology? What is the mythology of digital economy? If we think about it, mythology is about the creation and evolution or the story of any thing that we are talking about. So what's the story of a digital economy? So about in 1995, digital economy, the word digital economy was coined by, I believe, Don Tapscott in a book called Digital Economy, Promise and Perils of New Network Intelligence. Promise and Perils of New Network Intelligence. That was the book. And that's the origin, I would say, is the origin of digital economy. And that time, digital economy was about all the businesses that is done on computing technology. And by extension, it was about all the business that is done on internet. But over the last 25 years, the digital economy increasingly got intertwined with the traditional economy, and so much so that it's very difficult to delineate the difference or the boundary between the two now. So what I'm trying to say is we have evolved over the last 25 years since the time this word digital economy was coined, and today we stand in the intersection of very human endeavor. The digital economy is in the very center of the human endeavor. It has moved from the peripheries and came to the center. And I'll further talk about it depending on the question, but we cannot think beyond, we cannot think of any work, any enterprise, any business without digital being part of it.
Let's expand on that for a little bit, if we might. So given that the word was coined only 25 years ago, but yet has been so prolific in how it's impacted every facet of commerce, how are small businesses, local stores, corner shops responding and reacting to this shift towards a digital economy?
Well, this is where things get a little bit tricky. Quite a bit of small stores or small businesses are being forced to compete against larger enterprises such as Amazon. And what we're seeing is that many of these small businesses are being driven out of existence because they either don't have the tools that they require to understand the data that they need to be able to grow or even sustain themselves, let alone compete, but that they're actually suffering cannibalization against the very platforms where they're trying to thrive. And I think that this is one of the sadder aspects of the evolution of digital economy. However, what it is doing is it's giving people with innovative thought and abilities to be able to expand their ideas and grow and start new ventures that will hopefully will come into competition with the major players and give them a run for their money. But more traditional businesses are definitely having a problem, and we're starting to see it in small towns across, I guess, the United States and other countries. And competition is just turning more into monopoly.
Yeah, I see similar types of patterns. I mean, our clients tend to be large chemical manufacturers, but they sell to smaller customers. And we find that the large chemical manufacturer wants to automate. And, for them, the digital economy is, instead of getting a paper purchase order or sending a paper invoice and getting a paper check, they want to turn those business documents into electronic data streams. So then when they have sets of customers that can't afford to establish an electronic connection via EDI or XML or some sort of mechanism, or they don't want to go to a web portal to enter their order because they're trying to do their work, our clients have asked us to put in place technologies to help those smaller customers of theirs place orders using their existing systems without changing anything. And so that's a place where we've used, I discussed it in the keynote, machine learning, artificial intelligence to be able to more cost effectively ingest the orders of those customers that are the backbone of the small business economy, and get the orders for their raw materials into their suppliers' systems without having to make an IT investment.
I just wanted to make a point. One of the things, because there's a lot of compassion that needs to take place in these processes, but it's actually, in my strong opinion, it's the crux of innovation that drives this creative destructionism. And we've seen it repeatedly through life cycle adoptions. This will probably be one of the largest tsunamis of impact globally that will destroy small businesses, flatten them, and then they'll have to start over and repurpose themselves. It's actually the very natural artifact of creative destructionism, which is the byproduct of innovation. And so we're actually creating the demise of many existing structures with the hopes of accelerating to a new level where we're able to deliver the needs to our species in a better, faster, cheaper manner, which is the very crux of the rationale that sits behind pervasive innovations. So even though these things happen and it's horrible, it's very disruptive, it's actually the very component that is given from the core of the innovation.
I wanted to touch on one of the things that Dara brought up in her remarks, which was around the advent of these centralized marketplaces such as Amazon or Shopify that's done a couple things. It's introduced new channels and opportunities to these small businesses, but it's also created this centralized monster in a way. And there's an interesting article called Why Decentralization is Important, where the author, whose name's escaping me right now, talks about this S-curve and how when marketplaces are first introduced, they create an opportunity for developers and a two-sided market, the consumer and the developer, to meet and to interact. But as you climb this S-curve, the centralized marketplace begins to cannibalize their own ecosystem and take away data, take away permissions, take away the privacy of the individual users. And I was wondering if anyone on the panel had thoughts about centralization and decentralization of these types of marketplaces.
Yeah, sure. Since the business I run, Sliver Business Services, is focused in small and medium businesses, I would like to weigh in on this. Increasingly, we are seeing a divide between small, medium businesses and multinational enterprises. And that divide is going to increase in this new digital economy, continue to increase, unfortunately. Sorry, again, your question was specific to centralization versus decentralization, right? So we have seen, at least in my career of 25 years, I have seen that there is always a kind of ping pong between centralization and decentralization all the time. And one management consultant comes and says, okay, now decentralization is in vogue, we need to decentralize. 5 years later, another management consultant would come and say that now it's time to centralize. So I think debate may not be as much as centralization versus decentralization, but the debate could be, who is the beneficiary here? So who is benefiting? Is the business benefiting or the society benefiting? Is the individual benefiting or the government benefiting? Who this new world order called digital economy is for? If you look at individual, they strive for freedom. They want more ways to do business. They want different ways. They want faster for their own reasons. When we look at the government, it wants to govern, it wants to control, it wants to regulate. So there is, and government is acting on behalf of the collective, the society at large. So there is always a tussle between individual and the government, individual and society. So in this very tussle lies the phenomenon of centralization versus decentralization, the tussle between individual and the government. And that has been there 100 years ago, that was there 1,000 years ago, and that will continue in this digital economy. We have to just figure out a way to live with it, recognize it, and adapt to it without creating more conflicts within ourselves.
Yeah, the one thing I've heard a couple of times is the concept of evolution and competition. And, you know, I see the digital economy just another level of, you know, humans adapting. And I unfortunately agree with you. I think it's going to drive the divide in people more and more, because you're going to have people that are capable of using, there's many more tools available to a small business than there ever were in terms of, you know, cloud platforms. You can spin up a business very quickly. But the question's going to be which of the entrepreneurs are capable, especially ones that are coming up and bootstrapping themselves, who is going to have enough resources to be able to do that? Because what you don't want to do in the economy is have someone that doesn't have resources but has the best idea, you know, and you know, they're held down while someone with a worse idea but more resources, you know, moves ahead. So part of it, I think, also is, you know, how do you have the right financing mechanisms? You know, microfinance in some form or fashion, so that people that have good ideas are able to access this great portfolio of tools, you know, to bring more, you know, utility to the economy.
Let's talk about some of those tools and technologies that we're touching on here, because I do believe that we are in some phase of evolution, but maybe there's a tipping point where next-gen companies, maybe some of those in this room, will hit hyper growth. Are there any thoughts on the panel, perhaps from David Kelly, around what tools and technologies will enable next-gen companies to achieve hypergrowth in the digital age?
It's my thought that many of the tool sets and that's usually what precipitates in these paradigm shifts, is a suite of tools that even novel individuals, entrepreneurs in particular, jump in and start creating this next experience, this cohesive innovation. I see some beginning development, but I think the tools that will mostly be used you've never heard of them yet. one innovation we did in our company was using AI for marketing on the internet. It's an entirely new category. We just don't have enough time to package it and productize it and sell it. But you see the potentiality of these tool sets that can make mega impacts. And on that note, I think that for our discussion yesterday, Damon, is that what I see and what I call these silos, these vertical implementations of technology, AR, VR, et cetera, cyber, security, it's actually, in my opinion, the functional convergence of these as they are implemented that creates the explosive need set that will create the vacuum to create tools. Because ultimately, you're trying to empower the little guys, right? They need those tools. And then I'll just insert this. The Santa Fe Institute did a beautiful mathematical model on the implosion of these changes. And if you have a chance to look it up, it's amazing. It's really driven out of socio-consciousness. But this is what our species does, is we keep trying to improve what we do, and we make a conscious and mostly subconscious effort to emulate ourselves. We've seen in the Industrial Revolution, we started to emulate our physical movements. Now we're in this modality of emulating the human consciousness, the brain, and working on some very, very advanced things so that we as a species can have a better outcome. It's all a statement of evolution, but back to the tool set question, I think you're gonna see things develop that are mind-blowing. I think you're gonna see things in AI that absolutely, the componentizing of AI so that people can thread through common ubiquitous layers like XML and utilize those resources is gonna be probably the most empowering time in history where the little guy has got the arsenal of tool sets to do massive things in his market space.
Did you have a comment, Gary?
Yeah, you just made me, think of the evolution that our company has gone through. We built solutions for, multi-billion-dollar companies, but as we move into the SMB marketplace, we've had to figure out ways to expose some of these tools to smaller businesses, who can't afford a six-figure project to, interconnect some systems. And so we've come up with ideas and are actively rolling them out. They're rolled out in some specific areas related to logistics, but like an API store, so that a small company that wants to have visibility into their global logistics, for example, instead of having to have a project, can just subscribe to an application programming interface, a small XML file, and they can have access to the tools that like large global companies are using. And they can have those same types of systems available to them. And I see that as, you need a platform, like we have a platform strategy to do that. And I think there's other companies that have different software applications, but having companies that have the software applications, then easy ways that a small company can interconnect to them could allow that small company to build a mix and match application that specifically works for their market and business needs.
It's great to have the tools, and I think that it's definitely admirable that companies are going to be working towards making them, especially for small businesses and whatnot. But before the tools will be used to their full capacity, I think that we have to attack the education and the abilities of the potential users that will be using these tools. And as somebody who oftentimes works with small and medium-sized businesses, like you had said, the tool set is oftentimes too expensive or too cumbersome or too complicated. And I think that the needs of these types of businesses need to be taken into consideration first and foremost. And before getting into AI, I think for marketing, one of the major factors that needs to be done is to go back to basics and understanding exactly what works, how it works, and thoroughly researching how it can be adapted in a unique way, because currently what we have, the tools that go ahead to do this for marketing, take aggregate data from various data sets, and then what the companies get back, these small companies or medium companies, what they'll get back is a set of best practices. Now, if you're investing thousands of dollars a month or tens of thousands of dollars a year in order to have access to this kind of tool, getting a series of best practices is not exactly what you're looking to receive. So I think that these are areas that are going to have to be thoroughly investigated and worked on much more and developed in a much more finite arena.
It sounds like with the right access and education, these tools, the tools can really help level the playing field for perhaps the smaller and mid-sized companies. I think equally so, gaining access to this digital economy helps level the playing field from a geographical standpoint. I'm curious if there are any thoughts here on what the impact is of the digital economy and cross-border trade and being able to access new and different markets.
So it has a very wide implication, and we have already seen the implications of digital economy. It's not new anymore. We have been seeing the evolution of it for the last 25 years. As a great person once said, that science without compassion is one of the 7 deadly sins. I'm not able to exactly quote the phrase, but it was a quote by Mahatma Gandhi. So the tools that we have today, we talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning. We have to ask, where is the human angle to it? Are we creating those tools to alienate ourselves from one another? Or is there any, are those tools going to bring us together? So now the question is about the global value chain. So is the new technology going to create a new global value chain, which we have already seen? We can source our services and goods from various geographies. It's not local anymore. And there are many other implications also. The labor laws. The Uber initially worked around the labor laws and created the software, and now government started to catch up. Then comes the question of availability of labor, skilled labor. Then the question is about the rise of intangible capitalism. So many issues are involved here, or facets are involved here with digital economy in the global, when we look at the global scale, that we have to identify each one of them and label them and tackle them one by one before we kind of try to bring them together and solve the problem which we have in hand. So I'm just trying to put different concepts out so that there is no one answer, but if we put the concepts out, the issues out, perhaps we can discuss each of them individually and kind of try to arrive at a possible answer.
So our panel is actually pretty geographically diversified, perhaps. At least 2 of us came from another country to attend today. Dara, I believe you came from Israel to join us for this show. Did you have some thoughts on the digital economy and cross-border and international implications?
Well, what we're finding in Israel is being American, I don't know how many people in the audience are American, but Americans definitely benefit from lower pricing than what we have in Israel. A pair of Nike shoes, which may cost you $70 here, costs us the equivalent of over $200 in Israel. And what has happened as a result is Israeli consumers have become smart shoppers, and we tend to go online and purchase cross-border. And at first, the government they weren't tracking all of this, and everything was fine. And we enjoyed it a lot. And then they caught on. And so we started getting hit with taxes, and we were able to make purchases for about $150 before we would start being taxed. And then they lowered it to $75, and I believe that they've gone ahead and they've lowered it again. And the major reason that they're doing it is because they're trying to bolster Israeli small businesses. But because of the high prices that consumers are forced to pay in brick and mortar, we're still going cross-border and online to complete our purchases, even though we have to pay the taxes because it's significantly less. So if we take that, at least in the Israeli consumer's point of view, into consideration, when we think about the digital economy from that aspect and how it's affecting our Israeli economy, we can see that on the one hand, if the Israeli business wants to survive, there's no choice. They're going to have to lower their profit margins. On the other hand, some of them may choose not to, and they may just decide to go into drop shipping or into other industries altogether, just because that will be their area of profit.
So, excuse me, when you talked about the Israeli government setting thresholds for taxation, that's part of this three-part equation that defines the digital economy. On one side, you have the infrastructure, you have the hardware, you have the networks, you have the sort of communication software component. On the other side, you have the providers, the e-businesses, the transfer of goods. And in the middle, you have policy and government and regulation. So in that vein, should regulation be put into place to ensure fair competition between large businesses and conglomerates and small companies?
If you ask me, yes, but to an extent. I think that everybody deserves a right to compete, and I do believe that large business becomes large because they have a better, in often cases, better offering or service. However, it's a very dangerous situation where you have too many large businesses controlling too much of the economy and too much of the wealth. So I think it's important to bolster small businesses in order to ensure that sort of diversified portfolio for the country, as well as ensure that more people have jobs. If all of a sudden Amazon decides to close a fulfillment center in a specific location, thousands of people could potentially be out of work. And that's a really scary issue, especially today when dealing with the aftermath of Corona, and we don't know what we're going to be facing in the future.
I have something to add on that. I'm actually a local government official back in the Philadelphia suburbs, so have some awareness of government processes, and also one of the business areas that I'm responsible for relates to electronic invoicing processes globally, which a lot of the processes are driven by government regulation. And so first, I think good government policy to achieve these types of objectives is a good thing. At the same time, I see both firsthand and also I'll tell a short story about how sometimes government policies are sometimes written and put into law, and they're not that well formulated because, making laws is like making sausages. Like, you don't want to see the process. There's a lot of them are just poorly written, even though they might have good objectives. So, for example, Guatemala put in place electronic invoicing standards to basically make sure that intercompany transfers went through the government process to make sure that the taxes were paid correctly. Well, the IT burden on doing that for a large company was like about 5 times higher for like a very small market, was about 5 times higher than it was for Germany, which is a huge market. So I don't think when the government put the policy in place, I don't think that they intended that to be the case. They just didn't know. And so they didn't put in place a policy. Italy did a similar thing with electronic invoicing. They told all the service providers and companies, okay, we're going to put in this policy. You have 3 years to adapt your systems to it, and then we're going to keep that in place for 10 years or whatever, at least. So people made that investment. So literally, the government then changed. At around the 3-year point, after all these systems were in place, they said, new policies came into play, and they changed it. So then all these companies had just invested all this money into this electronic invoicing assurance process. Then they had to go in, now they're in the process of putting in a new one. So I think, while I think it's good for government to try to address these things, I think it has to be done, wisely, and probably small interventions are better than large ones from my observation.
Yeah. And to add to what Gary said, I think government will continue to be reactive because government cannot predict what's going to happen. Because somebody from the periphery will come with some innovation, with some idea to exploit the new emerging technology and come to the center of the economy and take over a particular industry completely. As I said, Uber is an example. Uber is not a taxi company. It's a software company. They exploited the network speed, 4G speed, and developed the app which could provide real-time status to the consumer as well as the driver, and brought the market, created the market for rider and the ride. So government did not anticipate, cannot anticipate, and it bypassed a lot of labor laws, it bypassed a lot of union constructs of taxi drivers, and came to existence. While government works on plays the catch-up, the entire taxi industry was gone, more or less, give or take. So that's going to be there. That tussle is always going to be there.
If it's okay, I just want to layer in
Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
one more thing on that, because also the government regulations sometimes actually drive work, and it's almost like this fake economy in a sense, because companies try to reduce their taxes as much as they can. So maybe the best thing from a supply chain standpoint is to ship the goods from here directly over to there. But if it crosses this border, there's a certain tax implication. So companies actually, there are people crunching the numbers to figure it out, and they'll actually design the process to move the materials from here down to this other country and back up to this country, so that they can go through like a low-cost tax. It might be taking more fuel. It might be, consuming, more transportation resources, but they do it because it will save them money. And then there's people, very smart people trying to figure out those processes.
Sorry, just to add to that right quick, just to build on what you were saying, Gary. In Israel, Amazon tried to build a fulfillment center. And I think that attacks exactly what it is that you're discussing. And the Israeli government actually put an end to it. And the reason that they put an end to it was because they felt that the smaller businesses in Israel, because Israel can't compete with the United States, it's a much smaller country. So they said no, simply because they knew what the impact was going to be on Israeli-grown businesses. So this would be an example of preemptive legislation at more of a federal level. And I think that this is something that potentially smaller countries are looking into preemptively as a different point of view or a different perspective of what would be going on over here.
David Kelly?
Yeah, I thought I would share a funny memory. When I was in college, my undergraduate, U.S. President Ronald Reagan was leading the charge, and he said, the most terrifying words he'd ever heard is, "Hi, I'm from the government, and I'm here to help." And I think that I think this is really relevant. It's actually profound when you consider it. But I think that what we have to do is come back to the fundamentals of why businesses even exist. And they should only exist, stealing this from Harvard, for value creation. That's it. And so I'm a strong fan of allowing the markets to just take shape, let people make their own choices. And when we have, I'll give you a little hint why this is important to me. In the first quarter of 1995, I was directing an advanced technology group for a company nobody remembers called Packard Bell. They had risen to #1 in the industry. They leapfrogged Compaq and leapfrogged Apple Computer. And everybody was talking about Windows 95 because that was what was going on. And I had this really cool meeting with this guy named Jeff. He was so persistent. And so I said, fine, I'll have this meeting. And he said, I want to show you what I'm doing. And he brought up a very flat screen, said, type in your favorite author. I typed in Tolkien, et cetera. And he said, so what we're doing right down the street is in downtown Seattle, right down in Pioneer Square, and we're wrapping books on the floor. I said, that's fantastic. I said, this is exactly what nobody knew what the internet was. I said, this is a perfect example of fundamental e-commerce and doing some really cool things right. And really must add, the super nice guy. And after it was over, the president of the division said, so what's the name of the company? I couldn't remember at the time. I was going back to my desk. I said, oh, yeah, that's right, Amazon, like the river. And so when I go back in my mind to I'm aging myself, to a data point like that, and you see these concerns about Amazon, I go back when Jeff was hat in hand, very intimidating to even have this meeting. And that is what I hope to see more of. Company names you've never heard of erupt because they're creating value creation. I love to sit there and order something online and have it show up at my door like within a day or two. That's value creation. I think what we need to do is get back to the fundamentals of why businesses exist. They're there to serve us, right? And when they erupt, there's always some collateral carnage that happens, one. And two, there's always a takeaway. But this is the whole notion of destruction, creation, creative destructionism that causes these things to shift. And I just want to add one more thing so we're cognizant of it. We have value chains throughout the world. And when somebody invokes a profound, better, faster, cheaper innovation, it causes that value chain to augment, and then we see this massive redistribution of wealth. That is the booty prize, and that's what we should all be striving for, and not get too concerned about the process because it's very messy. We as humans specialize in doing a lot of messy things, but I think that the end result is a better human experience, and I think in future generations we'll see that. And right now, there's the very baby steps of all these profound technologies making an impact globally. Okay, that's enough.
Thank you. Out of respect for the time we have and wanting to invite the audience to participate, I think it's a good moment to shift and open up the floor to some questions. I think we have about a little less than 10 minutes left. So I think there's a question with this gentleman here on the stage left, stage right.
So I've got two questions, or one is probably a point, but with what we're seeing with the Amazon marketplace and with these marketplaces, aren't we starting to see it become decentralized? I think 3/4 of the things I buy on Amazon today aren't from Amazon. They're through Amazon because that's the technology, that's the platform that enables me to do that purchase. But I've got a regular monthly shipment that I send to my mother that's a box of chocolates from a chocolate company in New Jersey that I would never be able to buy from, and it's her favorite candy. So I'm able to do that now with this technology. It seems like democratizing these technologies is also an enormous enabling factor for these small businesses. And that's the thing that we should be focusing on. And the second thing is, small businesses can't afford to innovate. We can't. We will never be able to do it. I'm running a team right now that's doing amazing things with artificial intelligence because Microsoft has democratized it for me. The initial bot frameworks that were initially built by Microsoft for helping Macy's for solving a Black Friday credit card crisis, or helping Hewlett-Packard with their printer division, those tool sets cost millions and millions of dollars to develop. And today I can subscribe to it for, pennies and consume it on volume at scale as big as I can possibly get and deliver it to my customer base. It's the democratization of these tool sets that's going to be the change that I think all of these small businesses are going to need to be able to compete, and compete globally. I'd love to be able to buy a ton of things from an Israeli business if you'll just point me in the right direction.
Thank you for your comment. I'd like to react quickly, and then I'll hand it off to Dara. I agree with your sentiments on the democratization, but I'd like to challenge your suggestion that Amazon is distributed or decentralized, I think. I think we're confusing a platform and a marketplace, and it's several million third-party sellers with decentralization. In fact, Amazon is the most centralized marketplace. 52% of all online transactions go through Amazon. Amazon controls the gateway, they control the payment processor, they control the customer information, the customer relationship, everything. If you are participating on Amazon as a marketplace, that's all you are as a participant. So you don't have access or own anything, and Amazon uses that position to exploit all of those third-party sellers. They take their data, they take their customers, and oftentimes they replicate, high-selling products and just do it at a faster, cheaper way.
Just to build on what Damon was saying, which, by the way, I wholeheartedly agree with, one of the biggest factors that keeps a small business small and where larger businesses are able to grow is small businesses don't usually have the understanding on how to work and leverage their data, their existing customer data. And this is something that is an absolute game changer. And when companies understand how to do customer retention or customer lifecycle properly, whether they choose to incorporate AI, whether they choose to work with a statistical model such as RFM, whatever it is that they decide, I can tell you I've gone ahead and worked with tiny businesses where we implemented RFM and used Excel sheets, and they enjoyed exponential growth. It's a matter of understanding what it is you're looking for, how you're looking for it, and what you're going to do with it. And just to build on what Damon was saying, yes, these larger companies are collecting your data. And it's not just Amazon, it's Etsy as well. And Etsy as a marketplace took a lot of artisans making whatever, whether it be soap, candles, clothes, and so on. And then they went ahead and they decided to add a recommendation engine. So if you happen to look at a beeswax candle, now they're going to show you the competitors from everybody else making a beeswax candle. And at the end of the day, they don't care about the artisan, they care about Etsy, because Etsy's making money off these transactions, right? So I understand what you're saying. I think in practice where potentially small, if you're looking at it through the point of either an artisan or a tiny business or a 1 or 2 man show, I think that these platforms are actually doing more harm than good with regards to helping bolster these new companies or these new individuals to build a sustainable business. I think that the platforms are just simply looking out for themselves and leveraging the data as best they can. And by the way, if you look at the reports from the back end that these small businesses are receiving, they can't see an entire funnel. They have no idea. And if you can't see the funnel, then you don't have actual visibility as to whether you're weaker or stronger and where you have to get better. You have no idea as well the marketing channels that people came from, let alone returning customers and so on. So you're still forced to go ahead and get a CRM system, whether it's going to be the free version of HubSpot or you're going to go pay for something. So I think it's a rough battle for these guys right now.
I think we could spend a lot of time on this subject, but I'd like to...
Okay. I walked in late, sorry, so I only heard the last couple people talk, and I just have a couple questions for you. And I'd like to ask the panel, so I'm Rosalie Bingham. I am in a different workshop or conference, and this gentleman on the right, David, said, come in, and I wanted to hear what he had to say, and I loved his last comment. My question to the panel is, tell me something that I don't know that you think it's really important that I know. And you don't know anything about me, but just that's a question for me to ask you so you can help me understand what's something, because I think we all need to be educated and aware. And I just want to know something that you think I should know that you can share with me. And I'd just like the panel to kind of tell me, because I'd like to get to know what they know.
What a unique question. Thank you for asking. If we could frame our responses in the spirit of decoding the digital economy, that could potentially help guide our responses, but we can start on this side.
Yeah, I think you threw a challenge to us. Let me take a swipe at it. So digital economy, we need to be very careful about it. It's going to create many millionaires. It's going to create many millionaires. I humbly and boldly predict that in 10 to 15 years, we'll have a trillionaire, our first trillionaire. I think he'll be more 10 times richer than Elon Musk. But there will not be any billionaire. The point is there will be a huge divide between the rich and the haves and have-nots. Big divide. So there will be trillionaires, a handful of them, many, many millionaires. The neo-millionaires will be the average Joe. Okay, so digital divide is going to continue. And what's the result of that? Result of that will be that a good size of population, I wouldn't say good size, but about 10% or so, will turn anti-digital. Anti-digital. We are seeing anti-movements, right? People are leaving meat. which was a staple or exotic stuff. Now people are turning and becoming vegan. Similarly, people will turn anti-digital. Amish people don't like to use technology. Similarly, the good-sized population will try to avoid technology because they will perceive that it's doing more harm than good. So that's a speculative answer, but I'm not sure it gives you any new insight.
Thank you, Sudhakar.
I think we're starting to.
Digital to 10%, what's the other 90%? You said 10% digital, anti-digital, so what's the other 90%?
Yeah, so 90% would be, among the binary I said, between trillionaires and millionaires. So huge divide in between. So that.
Later, I have a solution for that.
Yeah,
Sure, thank you.
And I was at a conference in 2016, and we discussed this whole issue. I was at a conference in 2016, and this whole issue came up of the digital divide. And unfortunately, I agree. We're gonna have haves and have-nots. Some small businesses are gonna be able to figure out how to adapt to it, and unfortunately, some aren't. We're seeing some of that with the political turmoil that we see in the United States. A lot of that fundamentally is driven by people that feel left behind by the economy. It's different than it used to be. And this conference I was at in 2016, we're all capitalists, like hardcore technology capitalists. But the end result that this group consensed on is there's going to have to be some sort of minimum income out there for people. Because we are going to have these trillionaires, and then we're going to have people that are just making it by, and then the trick is going to be how do you put some sort of minimum payment out for people and not disincentivize them from working and getting educated. So that was the conclusion that this group came to, based on this digital divide.
And I have an executable plan to do just that. So very, very solid, very non-confrontational. It's just accountability, truth-seeking, problem solvers, and those who are not.
We'll have to invite you to participate in the panel for the next time. David, was there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, actually what I wanted to do is take your key question, put it in the framework of the digital economy and where it's going, and answer your question succinctly. What you should know is this, is that with good intention, in theory, companies will be taking every aspect of your life and deducing it down to data. All of your habits, your purchasing your habits, how far you drive, your locations, your geography. And then these munging algorithms that are precipitous in various applications will come together to distill basically what's known as your psychographic profile. In other words, what things do you eat, what car would you like to drive, etc. This becomes very powerful data that then companies like Amazon turn around and push to you because they kind of know they can interpolate what you want. So what happens is at first it's kind of creepy, right? But I want to say this. I think that this have and have-nots paradigm, it's very easy to understand. I encourage everybody to go back and read the 1971 report during the Nixon administration. They did a fabulous job on this, showing that technology inherently creates some of the smartest minds from Princeton, et cetera, computer scientists, psychologists, just amazing outputs saying they could see the have and the have-nots emerge with this driver of technology. And if you look at history, you see a consistent result of anarchy. So they were trying to address this because of the 60s phenomenon, but they were trying to address this in government clear back in the early 70s. So profound report, encourage, like I said, everybody to look at it. But I want to say this. I think what we're going through is a very transient state. There will be have and have-nots. And we might feel a lot of pain in our life cycles. But in future generations, I don't think that will happen. That's not the nature of human species. I've said this repeatedly. If our pervasive attributes were to kill each other off with war and disagreements and fights about politics and religions, we would have wiped each other out a long time ago. As it turns out, the pervasive aspect that we have is that we love to get along, we love to care about each other, and we like to build networks that really meet our fundamental needs. And what we see is technology is acting as an accelerator for those dynamics, and we're all kind of introspecting ourselves saying, wow, this is profound. You can see it in a macro explosion across entire cultures. Every one of those innovations has a big impact on the culture. So I just wanted to preface this by saying, or close it out by saying, I think that we need to be cognizant that we're in a very transient, highly transient state, and that we as humans in our species will find our way so that future generations, maybe in 100 or 200 years from now, you're going to live in a world that's much, much more exciting than what our human experience is currently.
Thank you. And with that comment, I believe, do we have time? We're a couple minutes over, but I'd love to take it if we can quickly.
Go ahead if you keep it short.
All right, one more question.
Okay, my question goes back to earlier, we were talking about centralization with these large marketplaces and the need for decentralization of those marketplaces. I was hoping you could talk more about the core activities and services that would need to be decentralized from those marketplaces in order to enable that.
Well, I'll be honest with you, I think that people just have to get off these marketplaces. I think that's the best thing they could possibly do for themselves. Today, internet marketing is not a secret. There are plenty, you can hire decent companies to do the job for you. If you don't want to go down the route of PPC or whatever, you can go down to SEO. But at the end of the day, a lot of the profits and a lot of the potential clients that are coming in, a lot of the funnel is just being rerouted to your competition. And quite frankly, if I were in the position that I was selling something artisan or whatever, I'm not willing to put myself in a position where a certain percentage of my potential traffic is driven somewhere else because it's in the best interest of the platform that I would be marketing on. I would probably go back to basics, build a very simple site. I mean, sites like Wix, you can go ahead and you can build a site free of charge. It's a good way to get started. I would bootstrap myself up, but I would do everything I could to stay off these sort of marketplaces.
Maybe to clarify, not necessarily from a seller's perspective, but from a technologist's perspective, what services need to be split off?
So, first of all, I'm somebody that works very basically. I'm interested in the data and less interested in the actual platform that I'm using. The platform that I tend to use most often is Excel. So whether the database is being collected directly from Excel, that's what I'll do. And I think a lot of people get backed up in which tool should I use rather than what does the tool need to do for me. So if you're at a stage where you're collecting something like, I don't know, a few hundred data lines a day, I would say go ahead and use a free CRM system or Excel itself, and then afterwards figure out what it is that you're trying to accomplish. If you're looking to if you're looking for e-commerce, then you absolutely need a funnel that needs to be examined all the way from impression and looking at marketing channels and so on that will go ahead and take you into registration, purchase, and whatever. If you have another type of business type, then basically I guess I could say anything that will give you a funnel, map it out first. Try and stay away from companies that sell you just a simple promotional calendar, right? So you could probably work with just a simple email ESP and something for your database. You don't need anything big to get started. If you like, we can discuss it afterwards.
It probably also would want to, maybe it's not technology, but disallow the ability to manufacture or source products. So if someone sells through the marketplace, it's probably a bad thing to then go ahead and use all that market data to then decide, I want to go ahead and make this product, and this product, because then you're using the customers as guinea pigs, basically, and then you're stealing the ideas. Then the marketing side would be another thing to peel off, but technologically, I could see that would impact the ability of the platform to operate the way it operates.
Thank you, Dara. Thank you, Gary. Actually, just to tie that last thought up, I recommend researching something called headless checkout. It's the decentralization of payment processing and gateways, so it's something that adds to that whole story. Well, with that, thank you very much for to our panelists for their expertise, for their participation. Thank you to the audience for hanging in there with us on a Friday afternoon. And I hope everyone else continues to enjoy the show. Thank you.
Thank you so much, panelists. That was very insightful.